Does Iran need nuclear weapons to deter Donald Trump from annihilating its people? There's no question at this point that Donald Trump's recent public declarations and social media posts have literally threatened the very existence, even the annihilation of Iran and its people. Literally. In fact, while both Israel and Iran have had indirect or proxy military conflicts, Iran has never directly attacked Israel until it was recently directly attacked by Netanyahu and Trump in tandem using both the US and Israeli militaries. So who is it that should or should not have this Pandora's box? And I'm referring to nuclear weapons. Because before all this occurred, there remains to this day clear and credible evidence that the Iran nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, which was the nuclear agreement Obama signed with the Iranians, was working during the period while it was in force from 2016 to 2018. In fact, there's broad agreement among arms control experts that the deal was functioning as intended before Trump terminated the agreement. However, Donald Trump, without merit or acceptable clarification, simply moaned that the deal was a strategic failure, and because apparently it allowed Iran to have simple autonomy in defending itself, something every country should have. But was this simply a slave mentality towards a people Donald Trump simply hated? But just as problematically, did Donald Trump kill the deal with Iran because President Obama, a black man, worked out the deal with Iran? Donald Trump's disdain for the first and only black president we've ever had couldn't be more obvious, yet while at the same time couldn't be less warranted. In fact, the main authority monitoring the Iran nuclear agreement was the International Atomic Energy Agency. That authority repeatedly reported that Iran was complying with its nuclear commitments. Inspectors verified that Iran stayed within limits of uranium enrichment levels, stockpiles, and centrifuge use. The agency also stated it had the access needed to monitor Iran's declared nuclear facilities. Another of Donald Trump's complaints was that the deal would end after some 15 years. So Trump ended it after just 2 years, failed to come to any agreement with Iran, and has now tangled the U.S. in a war with Iran of unknown duration, causing the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz, the disruption of global oil commerce, damage to the U.S. and the world economies, along with increasing the threat to the national security of the United States of America. And in addition to all this, threats by Donald Trump to annihilate Iran and its people simply because Donald Trump can't control his anger resulting from his horrendously destructive failure on an immense global scale. It's all Donald Trump's fault. A catastrophe created solely by Donald Trump. But the ultimate question here is, does Iran have the right to obtain nuclear weapons to protect itself, in this case, particularly from Donald Trump? And Iran doesn't even have nuclear weapons. How can you say no? How can you say no? Is Iran more dangerous than Donald Trump? I'd have to say no. Honestly, I don't think so. Has Iran ever used nuclear weapons on another country? Again, no. But has America? Yes. So of all nations, does America have the right to tell any country what weapons they can or cannot have? Especially when the U.S. has used those weapons and its present president, Trump, threatens to annihilate other countries and their peoples. If America can have nuclear weapons with such a president as Donald Trump, who the American people elected, does the U.S. have any grounds or even the credibility to arbitrarily or otherwise determine what countries can and cannot have nuclear weapons? Look, I hate nuclear weapons, but who is Donald Trump, of all people, to tell another country they cannot have nuclear weapons while at the same time articulating the annihilation of an entire people? The very people Trump wants to preclude from having a nuclear deterrent to protect themselves from him, Donald Trump. In fact, if there was any justification for America's authority to dictate who can have nuclear weapons, Donald Trump obliterated it with his repeated threats to annihilate Iran and its people. This is American News Trust. I'm Steele Black.